This is Art Talk with April, an artist podcast where we meet artists from all around the southeastern states and around the world. Thanks for joining us. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Art Talk with April. Today I have Rosie Fitzgerrel, and Rosie is a landscape and figurative and portrait painter, as well as a graphic designer. Yeah, I think, and that's for me personally, that's so fun. That just is like, even like discovering somebody online that I'm like, wow, I really like what they're doing, and then looking through their stuff and trying to figure out what is it that I like about what they're doing, and how can I transfer that to my own work. If that's what I'm looking for, what medium are they using? What paper? What, like in sort of research,
Yes.
like what they're doing and think, oh, I wonder if I want to do something like that or try it. And that's a whole nother experiment.
Yeah. No, and I think too, like in graphic design, right? Like if we're working, if I'm working with a client and they're on a branding project, let's say,
Yeah.
hey, send me what you like. Like send me the things that are inspirational to you. And as artists, I think it's important to take time and do the same of, going to gallery openings or first Fridays or going to art museums and just kind of like taking stock and sitting with what is really resonating with us and what about it is resonating. I think about last year I participated in a program called Crit Crew, which is with a mentor artist, a guest mentor artist, and then 3 other artists, and you meet once a week and look at your work and kind of analyze. And so it was going through that, and there's a painter, Jackson. I'm gonna mess up with his name, Jackson Dawes. And he has this painting of a sapling in Millennial Park.
Yeah.
So you have like some skyscrapers in the background and this like new tree. It's just sort of like presenting this scene. And it's like, how do you feel about it? And I was like, wow, that's what I want to do with my work. Right. But I don't know that I would have had that like clear idea had I not taken the time to kind of look at what other artists are doing, kind of analyzing what I like or dislike about their work. Yeah. I think too about how we respond to work, and as artists, is the way that people respond to our work, is that really important that they respond in a particular way, or what feeling are we trying to convey, or how are we trying to connect? There was an artist recently at our local arts association has a critique night, which I normally can't go to because my daughter has dance that night, but I was able to go to this one. And there was a new artist. Her kids had, were in their 20s and had flown the coop. And so she was just discovering this art thing, and she was very vulnerable, and she'd done these kind of more like primitive figure paintings, but they were very powerful, but she felt very like vulnerable about it. But her message, right, was very clear what she was saying. And I was thinking about, well, why do I paint the way that I paint versus maybe like more, abstractly or more simplistically? Like, why do I have the style, the way that I paint? So anyway, yeah, it's just interesting to like look at these things and ask yourself these questions, because I feel like it gives me at least so much clarity on how I want to continue to pursue my work going forward. And it makes it easier, where I feel like I'm not fumbling around with what I want to do. Like, I know what I want to do. I just have to do it with, in between like being a mom and having my full-time job and all of that stuff.
Exactly. I'm right there with you on that. So that is a great segue into what I was going to ask next. And so, like, why do you have done a lot of landscapes and then you're talking about doing portraiture and figurative? Why are you choosing to do those types of subject matter? Like, what is it that is inspiring to you about it?
So like that's another thing is like not growing up in a family of artists. I also like didn't grow up in a family of like naturey people. I mean, my dad is a big birder and he likes going on hikes and walks, but it's not something that we ever did
Yeah.
growing up. And it's certainly not something that we did when we lived in Rhode Island. But when we moved to Chattanooga, that's sort of like one of the draws of this area is all of the
Sure.
beautiful hiking trails. I think Chattanooga has the most hiking trails within a 30-minute drive of the city center of any U.S. city.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's like, wow, this is really beautiful. And so, I did that a lot with when my kids were little, especially, and I was home with them. We'd go hiking all the time because it makes them tired and they're like pretty well behaved on a hike. And yeah. Um, and so it was just, yeah, like an appreciation, like, oh, this is so beautiful. I want to like capture it. And when I first started painting with gouache and doing the, like October challenges, I
Yeah.
realized like, oh, these are more like illustration challenges. And realizing that like I'm not an illustrator. That's not,
Yeah.
I think it's cool and interesting, but it's not really what I want to focus on. And
Yeah.
so, going out on hikes and doing like quick sketches of the area and then, taking a reference photograph and then coming back and painting it. Like I found myself doing that again and again and again.
Yeah.
Um, and just like naturally drawn to the beauty of nature. But I started the first painting that I did on canvas was based on a photo that I took of my friend when we were paddleboarding. We were like surrounded by all of these water lilies, and she like took out her phone and was taking a photo of one of the flowers. And so then I was taking a photo of her. And so I was like, wow, I think that's really interesting. Like this interaction between like, us being in this like very wild natural place, but like wanting, it almost looked like the flower was like looking at her as she was looking at the flower.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of like the starting point. And I just kept like following that thread. And then when I did that crit crew program, that's sort of when it really like solidified. That's what I am really interested in because we are animals, because we are of nature, because we desire, many of us desire to be close to nature. I mean, and cities greatly value having these green spaces, these
Sure.
parks. People really value that. And so trying to capture that in different ways, whether that's like figures within landscapes or kind of the refuse of humanity. I did this. The biggest painting that I've done so far is of Sedona, and you see like a water tower and these barrels and a pallet and these telephone lines. And that's because like there's a whole neighborhood that's like nestled right against this mountain. And so like, you have this like encroaching um, evidence of humanity, like, yeah, moving closer and closer into this natural world. And it's sort of this like tension
Yeah.
between are we ruining it or
Yeah.
are we of it? Or like, how do we be close? How are we close to it without ruining it? I think too of Ansel Adams, um, who famously, as he was photographing the West and trying to show people, like, look how beautiful it is out here. And so people started coming. And so then he was trying to hide evidence of people, of buildings and roads in these photographs.
Yeah.
And I feel like, yeah, frequently we see where artists want to remove that. And I want to say, no, like this is part of it. We are part of it. But it's just, I try to present it. I want to present the landscape very beautifully. And kind of analyzing like, why do I want to paint more representationally? It's because I don't want to dilute the message of like, this is really beautiful. But also I kind of want to leave it up to the viewer of whether like this is a good or a bad thing. like how we're encroaching or that we're encroaching at all, or should we be here?
Sure. Yeah. And, when you said that, it reminded me another interview that I did, and we talked about that, like, um, editing out certain things, and changing like maybe a reference photo or something that we've taken and we've decided, well, I really don't want to have that, power box or whatever in the image, and I'm going to take that out. But that's part of the decision making process, I guess, between unique artists is not everyone would have taken that out. And this particular artist probably would have, just because that wasn't like part of their message or their vision. But for another artist, it's precisely, what they wanted to, put in their vision. It's like and that's kind of what makes us all completely unique, even though maybe we're both doing landscapes. We've made decisions all along the way, that fit us in particular.
Right. Yeah. And so maybe when artist is trying to communicate, like, look how magnificent this this landscape is, or look how beautiful this tree is, or this flower is. And I want to say yes. And look at, look at these two figures, these two hikers. Do you think they should be there or not? Like, I think it's really important in my work. I'd like to keep the question open ended, because I want that room to, potentially like come back and look at a painting and view it in a different way and say like, I don't like this. This isn't good. Or like, I just see humanity just trying, like, striving to be closer to nature, but like, yeah, what are different ways that we can do that? We're going on our family vacation to Las Vegas next week, and so I'm very excited because I got a lot of my reference photos on our last trip to Sedona, and so I'm looking to do something similar here. But it's nice to go and kind of have this very clear vision, what I want to photograph for references. And it's interesting, like looking back at my references for Sedona when I didn't necessarily have that clarity, but like it's all there. Like that was the thread I was following, what I was interested in. I just didn't know how to articulate it yet.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. I think that's and that when you realize that, like, that you've been kind of going down a path that you didn't necessarily know was a path you were taking, but you were already going in that direction. I don't know. Something about that is sort of magical to me, because it's like, oh, so this really is my path, like this is something about me choosing this thread, like out of all threads. Something about this means something to me, and recognizing it and being able to say, okay, there's something to this, and this is something that's, very unique to my, because, like you can get to where you think, I'm just another landscape painter, but that's not true. That's not actually true, because everyone's making, their own way and doing it in their own way and choosing things all along the way to make it theirs.
Yes.
Yeah. So having those reference photos that still are along that path, that's super cool. Like if finding something like that about yourself is kind of like, oh, is reaffirming, right?
Yes. Yeah. Like those connections were there all along. You just didn't realize it, especially because I don't work particularly intuitively, like as a designer, right? Like you understand, like there's a process that you follow for everything. Like if you're doing a logo design, okay, I like to start with words, right? What are the words surrounding this brand? I start writing out, then I start working with typography, and then I start working with symbols, but I'm only working in black and white, and like only later will I introduce color. And like, it's very kind of regimented. And so my painting process is sort of the same way, where, you know, I have my reference photo, although that's probably the most intuitive part, where it's like, what is catching my eye? Although now I have like more a solidified vision for that.
Yeah.
And then I'm, you know, editing my reference photo. What, you know, you were talking about the artist you interviewed removing something, and with my big, you know, landscape of Sedona with the water tower and stuff, I was like adding in, you know, more elements. And then taking that and doing, you know, a color study and a value study, and then bringing that up to the canvas and mapping everything out and blocking in the color, all of that as like a more. So it's always interesting to me then to talk to artists who do work very intuitively, and I'm just like, you know, oh, I chose this color because that's how I was feeling that day. And I know I was feeling very happy. So I did this big, you know, brush stroke, and I wanted to add gold foil. So I did. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. It's like another language I don't understand.
Like abstract, you know, that's something that a friend of mine, we talk about it all the time. We're like, wow, like, you know, like you think, oh, I could do that, but that's not necessarily true, because just because it's shapes and colors and textures or whatever, it doesn't mean that it's easy to make it look good and like be enticing, you know, or, you know, like to pull somebody in. You can make a really awful abstract painting.
Yes, I know, because I have done that.
Yeah, I know. I have too. I'm like, that's not easy to do at all.
No, my Sedona painting, I put it on. I bought this big canvas years ago because we were like decorating our bedroom, and we had like, you know, no budget. So I was like, oh, on HGTV all the time, they just take a canvas and they just like splash paint on it, and it looks great. So that's what I'm gonna do. And it was awful. And it just like hung in our bedroom, and I would look at it and I'm like, I gotta get rid of that. So I gessoed over it, and that's what I use. It's just the base, which is it's much better now. Yeah. But it's hard to, it's easy. I think it's easy to judge. It's easy to judge what someone else does as whether be, you know, oh, I could do that, or like maybe underestimate or not see the value in that. I also think about two people that paint or draw hyper realistically, and like that's very, very impressive. But it's like maybe you get so focused on how impressive the ability is that you like lose out on maybe a bigger message that the artist is trying to send. Or maybe they're not trying to send a message, and maybe they're just trying to like, look how cool I did the skin texture, you know. But I think it is important to kind of take a step back, and why are you making the choices that you're making, and are they serving the message that you want to share with, you know, your audience?
Yeah. I think it's a mixture of things too. It's like the message that you're wanting to share, but also your experience in making the thing. Because, you know, like some people, they don't want to have a reference image and do the, you know, value studies and plan things out. They just want to splash paint, you know, or like a detail person, you know, they love those details and those little bitty things. And so that's why they're going towards that. But I think everybody also to kind of, I don't know, in my experience, like I'm kind of a detail person, but I'm also realizing at this point in my career that maybe the details aren't as important to me. And I'm more illustrative too. So it's kind of like if I'm illustrating something and I'm trying to like have a message around it, why am I adding those details? Like nobody's going to even notice it. I'm just spending a lot of time, like doing something.
But then you think about like Mary Englebright, right?
Yeah.
Who she packs in so much detail in all of her drawings, and like then that's like becomes a fun thing to like kind of like search for these details. But if that's not like what you're doing or interested in, and you're, if you're illustrating something for a story or particular purpose, it's like, oh, okay, well maybe, we need to focus on these characters and like spend less time on this tree back here.
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly what I do. Like I get obsessed with like plants and trees in the background, and I'm not focusing like on the main subject matter as much, or or I have done both, but I think all of these things that we're talking about is what makes each one of us unique in the way that we're making whatever it is we're making, because we're choosing all along the way, are we doing it for, like to have some sort of vision or message? Are we doing it because we think it's fun to do it that way? It's all part of all of these variables that make our work unique, and when you're putting it up next to someone who does something similar, and you can kind of feel like, especially with social media and stuff, that there's too many artists or too many of this or that. And you're like, do I even matter in this, like huge millions of artists out there who are doing, something similar to me? Does it even matter?
Right. Yeah. And it's easy to be overwhelmed with that for sure. I think also I discount the importance of friends and family. Like I organized a group art show last year, and it was wonderful. But it was mostly like a lot of my friends that showed up to it. And I was like, oh man, instead of like, wow, my friends care about me so much that they like took time out of their Friday night to come to this art show that I put together.
Yeah.
And so, and like investors too, right? Like, or entrepreneurs, when they're looking for investors, they'll have like a friends and family round of funding. Like that's a very normal thing. And I think it's easy to like discount like, oh, well, I got 7 likes on it, but they're all from people I know. And it's like, no, like these people care about you so much that, they're going to take time out of your day to look at your art or comment on it or send you a message about it. And yeah, it's just, reframing that thing, and maybe your work is like unlocking something for them, or opening a conversation or something for them, and you don't always recognize the impact of your own work or see it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So as far as like what you're doing with your work and everything, or like what is your direction that you're wanting to take it in? Are you like on the business side of things? Are you wanting to like sell work at like festivals and have a booth, or get into gallery, like have a gallery representative, or like what is your, do you have any direction like that, or are you just kind of playing it by ear? Or
yeah, that's something I'm figuring out. I'm very like everything's an experiment, and I'm always willing to try something once. Do you know of Sister Karita Kent? Well, I guess it's just Karita Kent. She wasn't a sister at the end of her life. She was a artist, a printmaker, and a teacher at the Immaculate Heart College in California in like the 60s, the 50s and 60s. And so she has this amazing set of rules that she made for her students. I'm gonna pull it up really quick because I love it so much. But I use those rules as like a guidepost, I guess, when it comes to like my own art career.
that'd be fascinating. Definitely share.
Yes. Let's see. Rule one. Oh gosh. Let me pull this up. Find a place you trust and try trusting it for a while. Rule two, general duties of a student. Pull everything out of your teacher. Pull everything out of your fellow students. Rule three, general duties of a teacher. Pull everything out of your students. Rule four, consider everything an experiment. So like when it comes to like galleries or art, art market or art festival or something, like that's something I want to try and just see. Rule five, be self-disciplined. This means finding someone wise or smart and choosing to follow them. To be disciplined is to follow in a good way. To be self-disciplined is to follow in a better way. Rule six, nothing is a mistake. There is no win and there's no fail. There is only make. Rule seven, the only rule is work. If you work, it will lead to something. It's the people who do all of the work all the time who eventually catch on to things. For that, I think a lot about too, you hear about artists kind of starting out doing like a daily art challenge or draw every day challenge and end up like leading to them having a career. They're like drawing kind of the same thing day after day, and that leads to something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think about, I just need to like get my butt in the chair and like start painting. Rule eight, don't try to create and analyze at the same time. They're different processes. Rule nine, be happy whenever you can manage it. Enjoy yourself. It's lighter than you think. And then rule 10, we're breaking all of the rules, even our own rules. And how do we do that? By leaving plenty of room for X quantities. And then there's
Wow.
like some additional stuff at the bottom. But I love that set of rules because I feel like they're such good guideposts for all artists, just in terms of like staying curious and embracing fear and experimenting and not being like overly critical on yourself. And just like, yeah, just like doing stuff and making stuff, and don't like think about it too much, but think about it later, like when you're not
Yeah.
making it.
Oh man, that is awesome. Yeah. Send me that link or wherever
Yes,
you find that. I'll add that to the show notes, but holy cow. And a lot of that we have talked about in this, in our discussion just now. So that's fascinating.
I
So
wish I would have discovered her like earlier on in
yeah.
life.
Yeah, really. I feel like it took a long time for me. I mean, I still do it, like put limitations on myself and kind of make all these things like they're in my head. They're making me do things a certain way, but really I don't need to necessarily, like it's sort of self-imposed, I don't know, box that I would put things in, like when I'm creating something, like, well, I know I need to do it this way, but not necessarily because there are people out there who don't do it that way at all.
Right. Right. And so, yeah, it's just like, yeah, being open to doing things a different way or selling things a different way or, yeah. So, and so when it comes to like my art career, it's tricky because I have, this full-time design
Sure.
job. And I think I would, ideally, like eventually it would be nice to like do design part-time and like painting full-time. Cause when I'm not painting, I'm thinking about painting, or like I can't wait. Or I hope, that's the other thing is I paint at night after my kids are in bed. And so I don't always have energy to do that. And so it's like, oh, I hope I have enough energy to paint tonight.
Yeah.
So it would be a luxury to do that. But, I have to like, I need to make enough income to make that happen. And so I think like if I were analyzing myself from a business sense, I would say like I need to like sell more stuff online and like on my shop and try some of these art markets. But my big bottleneck right now is just like I work on these paintings and they take me like a month or 2 months to get through, and it's just slow. And so like I don't have enough work to like fill a 10 by 10 booth necessarily. But that is one of my goals next year. There is an arts festival here in Chattanooga called Four Bridges,
Oh,
and
yeah.
the Arts Association has an emerging artist program. So I'm hoping that next year I can apply to that, and I would hopefully have like enough work to like fill up my little space. But I'm gonna volunteer for the festival this year and just kind of like yeah, just taking notes, analyzing, like gathering information and seeing what would work and what wouldn't work. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a really great idea because one of the things I've learned is because I've kind of like dipped my toe into it and then pulled back out. And then like try it again, pull back out. But going to a show before like going through the process of applying to it and knowing what's there, like, is this show really where I should be? Because you can sign up and go through all that work of preparing and be there and be completely like not what that, like that show does. So,
right. Like if I was at a fair that was more like craft focused with more woodworking and pottery and stuff like that, I don't know that my work would like, resonate or sell very well in a show where people had the expectation to see that versus like maybe more like straight up arts festival or fair where you're having more fine art pieces. Yeah.
I've heard about the Four Bridges. So that's a really big one, right? Isn't it a big one? Yeah. That would be really interesting even getting involved and volunteering is probably a great idea. Just
yeah.
like
So of course,
with people.
I didn't look at my calendar when I signed up to volunteer. I'm also a Cub Scout, den leader, and our big camping trip in about an hour and a half away in Tennessee is also that weekend. So it's like I'm volunteering on a Friday, and then we're camping for 2 nights, and then I come back, and then I volunteer more on Sunday. So it's just a weekend of volunteering, but I'll be tired, but hopefully it'll be fine. It's more, I just want to, see what it's about and hopefully like talk to some other artists, meet some other artists and just get some more information.
Yeah. Because there's definitely going to be shows out there that are more like, there was one that I was really interested in last year, and I didn't end up going to it because I had a whole lot going on at the time. And it was more like sort of interior design, like gallery stuff. That's the kind of work that other people were showing.
Because it's a lot of money to rent space, and also it is intimidating just like starting and getting a tent and walls and all of that stuff. Yeah.
It's a big process and you can prepare for years. And like I've got like there are artist friends who have just continued to prepare and they change their booth and they add new displays or new signs or whatever it is. And I'll notice because I'm paying attention to their booth and what they're doing with it. And so I'll bring it up like, I noticed you got a new sign, or I noticed you started putting up the walls and displaying your art, whereas before you didn't have like any walls. There's a lot of prep and it costs so much money, and you have to know like, is this something that I want to put all my time and energy in, especially as a mom? Like,
yes, because you're away for a weekend. Maybe you have to travel. You have to transport all of your art and your tent and materials. And does that translate to, is that enough of, are you making enough income where the hourly rate is translating or not? And not to say that like we always have to do things, for money, but we do live in a capitalist society. And like, I do need to feed my children and myself and buy clothes and things like that. And like, I get that part of art can feel really icky. And that's definitely something that I'm still kind of figuring out. But I think it's important to talk about and be upfront of like, we need to live.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, if art is a way to do that, then like, great, but we need to like find that path, forward.
I mean, like, I have a full-time job, but I did have a whole conversation with my husband after doing a few shows. There was a moment where we had to sit down and have a talk because he was like, look, like I had a show where I didn't make back what I had spent on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it was like, now he wants to get involved. He's like, okay, now, like, what are we doing here? Like, are
Yes,
you
you're in the
going to
red.
make, yeah, are you going to make money back when you do these things, or is it just going to cost?
Right.
But
And
that's
it's
not
like, I want to
something.
support you in your, and
Yeah.
the thing that you're interested in. But like, yeah, is this a good financial investment, or do we need to
Like,
be
you
doing
told
other
me we
things?
were going to make money, not lose money.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so that's the tricky part, because it's not just, the cost of traveling there and renting space and the booth, but it's also all of the time that you've put into making these pieces, which may sell somewhere else, which would be great, but it's
Yeah.
something to consider too.
Yeah. You kind of have to, in your people that are in your circle, having those conversations around it to be like, okay, where's your line where your support starts to waver? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how far will you let me experiment with this
Right.
before it starts to, there starts to be like ultimatums, like, okay, if you don't make this money back, then you gotta,
Yes.
I mean,
Well,
that happens.
no, I think it's great to set goals and limitations, as far as like, okay, I'm going to try 3 shows and then like reevaluate how
Yeah.
I did financially and how I feel about it at the time. And like, if you still love doing it and it's working, then do it. And then, it's important to kind of like take those moments to reflect. And
Yeah.
like, I set these goals for myself and like, I'm not meeting them. So this isn't going to work for me. So we're going to like move on and do something else. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, one of my goals this year is to sell like an original canvas painting, which is like, yeah, figuring out the dark art of pricing is
Oh,
just, it's very like, yeah, nebulous, and nobody has a answer. And yeah,
yeah.
it's tricky, especially, I'm in Chattanooga. I'm not like in Atlanta or Nashville. It's a smaller market. It's people have less income to spend on something like an original painting that I put, 40, 50 hours into.
Yeah, that there what I have found is that there are a lot of things about being a creative person that are like that. That's just kind of foggy or unclear, and nobody really has the exact direction or answer, and you just kind of have to, like, test it, see if it works. Yeah, you're like,
Like feeling around in the dark. I mean, it's the same thing with like, how do
basically.
you get gallery representation? And it's like, well, you might want to show up for a few shows. Maybe then you want to send an email, and like it'll have like this many pieces of work, but you don't want to show like too many pieces of work. Yeah, and then you got to like build up this relationship. Like, no, there's nobody knows, because
Yeah.
for some people it's like, oh, I had an opening at a group show or whatever, and then this person approached me, and my work was just that good and resonated with what they were looking for in the gallery or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no like right or wrong
Yeah.
answer, unfortunately.
That's part of what I think makes it. I mean, it's very mysterious.
Yes, it is
It's a
very
mysterious
mysterious.
process. You're like, you know, even artists like Van Gogh didn't know, like, it was
He didn't
just,
show his work. Yeah,
yeah.
he never showed his work. Yeah, and I think, I don't know. Yeah, I think so many famous artists are male artists, right?
Absolutely.
And so, and many of them came from money or had the support of someone else. I don't know if you've seen like Vincent van Gogh's, like the letters that he would send to his brother with like the big list of paint that he would like his brother to order for him.
Yeah.
Or just like looking at one of his paintings in person, it's like, dang, was that like a whole tube of paint just like on this, like maybe 2 tubes of paint on this painting? Like, how much did that cost?
Yeah.
Um, and so there are these other elements that I feel like historically many artists just didn't necessarily have to consider or think about. Even when you think about well-known female artists from history, many of them came from finance and had a governess that taught them, how to paint, or they had, somebody in the family that was a well-known painter that taught them. And, there's a lot of like inherent privilege that can come with that. And so I think about that too, is just as a woman, sometimes, I'm like, I tell my husband, like, hey, how much should I price this for? You as a white man, like, what would you do? And he's like, more, like, price it higher, charge them more. And I can only imagine for people, other minority groups, for, if you're Black, or if you're part of the LGBTQ community, like, how much even worse some of these barriers are. But
oh gosh. Yeah, absolutely. And then if you're already, like feeling the strain of not being able to like make a career out of something, or not being able to like if you're really focusing on trying to pay your bills or do these things, it adds these whole other levels of stress and difficulty to just pricing something, and then, spending your last bit of funds on a booth, and what if it doesn't come to fruition? What if you have spent your last bit of money and it didn't come back in? There's a lot of issues around that, as far as like being able to continue, because you just can't. And
yes,
there's nothing there, or you don't have the support, or whatever it is. Everything costs so much, you know?
yes. Let's glamorize being an artist and also having a day job. Like,
Yeah.
there's one artist I follow. She's an amazing portrait painter. She paints in oil, and she's like, I have a day job. Like, I work, 3 or 4 days a week, and it gives me the flexibility that I need to like teach classes, or,
Yeah.
workshops or whatever, and also like pursue my own projects, but like financially support myself.
Yeah.
Um, and so I feel like, especially like on YouTube, right? It's like very glamorized, like, follow me in the day of a life of a full-time artist.
Yeah.
And it's sort of deceptive, because it's like sponsored by Squarespace. And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, they're an artist, and also they're like a content creator. And those
Yeah.
are like two different things. You don't have to be a content creator if you're an artist, or vice versa. Um, and so, yeah, I wish that's something that was talked about more. And sometimes I feel a little bit isolated in, because a lot of artists that I know are able to do it full time, or because they have spouses that earn a high enough income to support them,
Yeah.
or, and many of them are quite successful artists themselves, but it's like, you need time to be able to like build up your work and start showing and stuff like that. And that's been, I think, a harder trajectory for me, just because of the amount of time it takes me to complete a painting, and the amount of time that I have. I can't fill a 10 by 10 booth, and I can't like just start applying to shows left and right, because I just don't have enough.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a process. Absolutely. And that's a wonderful point, because I think even online, it's the same thing, as like where like people sort of present themselves a certain way online, and you might not realize that, okay, this person is making all this art, but they don't have kids, or they have two jobs, and they're staying up all night painting, or whatever it is, and you don't necessarily see all of that. And
Right.
you have an impression that they're full time, and they're living this amazing artist life, and they're able to do it without other income, So I think a lot of artists have day jobs.
Yes, yes. And yeah,
The
they're
majority,
teaching.
probably.
Yes, it's just that you have to have diverse buckets of income if you want
Yeah.
to, be a full-time artist, because you're also a teacher, or you're also a designer, or you make fine art, but you also make like stickers and products that you can sell. Yeah, I think it's just in order to just like be a painter full time, I feel like there's both, we talk about starving artists, and I feel like there's so much more opportunity now than there maybe ever has been in history for you to pursue that and be able to support yourself financially, because we have things like Patreon or Substack, or, places where people can support you monthly.
Yeah, subscription.
Yeah. But it is still really hard, and it is still like a big time investment. And so, yeah, normalize having a day job and being able to pursue your art.
Yeah, yeah. I forget, there was an artist that I found out that they were like actually an accountant, but they were very famous, and it was back in the, during the Impressionist time when the Impressionists were coming up. I don't remember who it was, but they were like a banker or something. I can't remember. But that fascinated me when I realized it, because it was like, oh, they're like, we're still talking about that artist, and they had a full-time job. Like they weren't just out there making art.
Right. Yeah. I would be curious, like, to look historically, like how many artists, or like what percentage of them had to pursue other things. And there's also something to be said. I have a friend who's like looking for a job that's not in teaching, because she was like, I just like want to go to work and like not be creative, so that I have energy to put into my art at the end of the day. And still get like health benefits and stuff like that. So there's like, it's definitely something to be said for that. And I feel like having a day job, I don't want to say that it's like demonized or anything, but it's just that like being a full-time artist is so glamorized, and it's sort of like held up in this high place. But it's like, well, I have health insurance, and like I have a retirement account, and those are great too.
Yeah. I got a 401k, like, holiday pay.
Yeah, right. Yes, I can take my family on vacation. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, I have seriously enjoyed talking to you today, Rosie. And where can we find your art?
I have a website. It's rosiefitzgerrel.com, but my last name is spelled weird, so it's Fitzgerrel. And then same on Instagram, I'm just at Rosie Fitzgerrel. So I post a lot, mostly in my stories. So like look for my stories, because I post probably too much in Instagram. If Blue Sky ever comes out with their like Instagram thing, I will be on there whenever that happens. But yes.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today. I think you're an amazing artist. I love what you're doing, and I'm rooting for you to get your work out there, and this Four Bridges thing, that
next year it's going to happen. Yeah. Thank you, April. It was so nice talking to you too. This was so fun.
Thank you for listening to Art Talk with April. New episodes are out every Tuesday at 6 p.m.